Anybody ever run a marathon? Excellent. Did you try doing that without ever practicing?
No.
Excellent. Do you think it would work if you didn't ever practice and suddenly run a marathon?
Not very well.
Not very well. Software teams all the time demonstrate adding new resources doesn't work. Excellent. Yeah, great. They never practiced. Of course it's not going to work. We practice all the time. So sometimes if the client says, you know what, the 4 folks I have working on my project, I need to get a couple extra story cards, we change the size of the team. We add more people. Now remember, every week we're moving a couple people around anyhow, so the team is used to this idea. They practice the skill. They know new people are going to come in and, wow, I didn't realize you guys changed that part of the code since I was here 4 weeks ago. The employees get something very powerful out of this. There's a trade-off. It's hard for them. It's a skill they have to learn. But they get to continuously improve their skills outside of one little task, outside of one little project, outside of one little technology. They might move from one technology to the next. They're getting a better resume. They also have to improve their communication skills or this system falls over dead. Now, when they improve their communication skills, how do you think that's going to be reflected when they go interview for a job somewhere else someday? They'll look better. I'm increasing their marketability. Right? Communication is a requirement for successful engineering. And they get to work with a whole bunch of different people. Not only do we change who you work with, in our organization we also do this other weird bad thing. The high priesthood of XP has pointed out that since we assign the pairs, we're doing social experiments. Excellent, I'm a manager. Cool, finally, that MBA comes in useful. Because when I have an employee who's not quite getting this particular aspect of unit testing, I'd like to actually choose to pair them with somebody I think they'll learn the skill from. And if they self-select, what we find is clicks form. And I don't want little clicks. I want everybody to work with everybody else. And every so often, every 2 years or so, we actually do another experiment where we say, great, let's try it. XP right out of the white book. Let's try Scrum right out of this book. And the teams go do it, and every time we do that experiment, they come back to, you know, I don't want to have to be picked last for the baseball team. Can we go back to the assignment and rotation where I get to work with everybody again? I don't know why. And it may be that our team is simply used to that, right? Because we're not practicing that skill of self-selection. But there's something powerful when you get the chance to build a relationship with everybody else on the team over the time that you're working. Because then you know, so-and-so knows this answer, I should go ask them even though they're not on my project.
Are you going to talk about how do you hire people?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course, it's a tiny little slice of everything because we're trying to cram so much in here. But you'll see, once again, we continue to grow. All right? Our organization flexes up and down because of our contractors and the number of projects. We'll have anywhere between 30 and 60 people over the last couple months. Our maximum capacity is a team of 90 based on the current facility. Our plan is not to move. Now, there are some logistical things that happen when you get this big. People get sick. People take time off. In our organization, when somebody takes time off, we go backfill them. We have a bench. We have a group of interns that work for us. We also have some contractors who also realize, hey, I don't have any work today, but if I came to Menlo to work on my self-study stuff, would that be okay? You bet. And then when somebody else leaves sick or doesn't show up, they're like, hey, I could work. And they get to go sit down right in that seat and say, great, you got your partner, right? We have continuity on the task because there was a pair working on it. So a new person sitting down is not that challenging. But we do struggle sometimes if all the projects all at the same time say, I want to expand. We have a full-time person whose job it is to be recruiting and keeping track of everybody's schedules and so forth. And so they need to understand what the needs are of our contractors in particular. So they build a little spreadsheet. It looks sort of like this. This was some snapshot at the time. And here's Mr. Crompton. Tom Crompton was he was a contractor, then he was an employee, then he was a contractor. You can see there's a little bit of fluidity in our system. And then one day, comes in, does his work, gets up at the end of the day and says, oh yeah, I forgot to mention one thing. Gee, what is that, Tom? I'm going to go walk the Andes. Oh, that sounds cool. When? Tomorrow. Okay, so the practice director from Commerce One goes, shit, you're fired. But I thought, why do I care? in my world, he's no longer a tower of knowledge. We have this flexible workforce. Okay. All right, Tom. Well, let us know if you come back, and that would be kind of neat. And then we talk to the factory floor manager, this person in charge of making sure there's a available pool of resources, and say, hey, Tom's not coming back for a while. Is there somebody who can work here tomorrow? And she gets on the phone, and she calls, and she checks, and so forth. As she works her list of all the people who are available, what we've found is we've tapped into a secret source of resources that you will never be able to use. There are these folks, really intelligent folks, who've gone off to have families. And then they've decided once they have these families, they like them and they want to keep them. And they don't want to go back to working 70 and 90-hour work weeks. So one example of that is Kimberly here. So Kimberly had a baby, decided the baby came first, but she didn't want to give up working. So she set aside a whole day a week for us. Okay, so we'll keep that in mind and see if we can get you on the schedule. Now we need to find some other people to fill in those other 4 days. Now it turns out that her husband was at the University of Michigan, had the summer off. Was a programmer that we'd used as a contractor before. And oh, by the way, when she's at work, he's watching the baby. Wait a minute. When she's watching the baby, where's he? Well, he's looking for a job. Hey, Archer. So over here, we have Archer's schedule. He works 4 days and then goes home. Now, it doesn't have to be a husband and wife pair, and you'll see that there's holes in the schedule and everything kind of matches up and so forth. So we started doing this, saying, great, you two have a single partner, but you create one little resource, and interestingly, they don't have to talk to each other. They don't even have to overlap, right? Because there's a partner to provide continuity on the task at hand. I don't even know if they talk at home about tasks. Could happen, especially if he refactors her code. But it's interesting, right? So an HR person comes in one day and they're observing this and we're talking about it. They're like, hey, you're doing job sharing. Gee, I guess we are, right? As we found that we had fluidity and flexibility with the resources, and we could offer people, sure, have a sabbatical for however long it takes to come back. Sure, which days of the week would you like to work? Oh, you're going to take Thursday afternoon to go to your kid's event? That's fine. With no regard to the client's project schedule. Because our job is to keep the project staffed and that nobody on the project becomes a tower of knowledge, both trapping the project and themselves. This creates all sorts of freedom. Freedom to go work on different projects, learn different skills, freedom to go off and do things with your family, freedom to go, who knows what in the world he was doing in the Andes with the sheep. Now, we found there was a natural correlation to the next step, which is Tracy went home to have a baby. Tracy didn't want to give up working all day. Her choice. Then, when she wanted to come back, there wasn't room for Maggie in daycare. And there was a meeting with a client where Tracy's influence would be very helpful. So he said, why don't you bring Maggie to the meeting? So Maggie came to a meeting with our client. And then we discovered, hey, there'd be some work, and we had some holes in the schedule, and Tracy was interested in coming in, but couldn't get a babysitter. And we said, well, you know, the meeting worked. Why don't you try coming in for an afternoon with Maggie and work on the project? Now remember, we pair, so it's not like you always need two hands to be on the keyboard. We were worried about a few things, you know, there's some liability here, but we checked. After careful study, we found out most of them don't actually have fangs. Those that do, they're very small. Their claws are sharp, but very tiny. And they don't move very fast. Now the alternative is perhaps that maybe something would happen to the infant. But you know, I've also found that most mothers are biologically wired. The baby is the number one concern. And people go, well, wait a minute. Aren't you worried if you're at work that the mother will be distracted by the baby? I'm like, if your baby was at home or at daycare, do you think the mother still wouldn't be distracted? Right? It's still going through their head. Imagine in a world where Tracy can just look over and say, look, Maggie's still asleep. Great, let's keep working. Now, mom sets the rules. We don't have a daycare. She can wear the baby in a little sack. She can put the baby on the bassinet. She can sometimes, as you can imagine, our friend here, he's not the mother. There are lots of volunteers, even amongst really shy programmers. Could I hold the baby? Mom gets to set the rules, right? She decides who gets to hold the baby and not. And you'd be astounded how many engineers don't actually have friends where they, right? No, oh. Now, it's kind of fun because when there's a baby in residence, the team behaves better. Now, we didn't strategically plan this benefit, right? Now, even imagine further. The client comes into a meeting. Baby on the team. Clients behave better. Isn't it cool? Some have even accused me. Oh, we were going to have a fight today. I'm like, we're still going to have the fight. Oh, this is to keep me civil. Hey, if it works, I'm willing to take it. Right? But you'll see. Babies wander around and so forth. And here we have a corner of our office. It's a big open office. There's no little offices, right? So there's actually a couple can be set up so mothers can go nurse in the corner, and there's a diaper changing station and so forth. Turns out, our friends at Google, remember the people that we borrowed the ideas for the dogs? Google, because they just moved into Ann Arbor, a couple of years ago, they've got a room for mothers to nurse. I thought, cool, that's great. We'll make sure we have a space. And I love this part. Google's got really smart people, right? Apparently most of them are male. They're a little confused about this. They have room for nursing, but you're not allowed to bring your baby to work. Now, I know there are technological solutions for this, but it seems to me that if you were going to set up a private space for nursing the baby would be the most important thing to bring along.
You think?
Not so allowed at Google. You can bring your dog and you can nurse, but you can't actually nurse a baby at Google. Menlo's cool. You can bring your baby and nurse them. We've actually won an award for that. Now, how do we get these people into our organization who behave well? We do extreme interviewing. We bring in 50 people at a time, and the first and most important criteria is, do you play well with others? So that's what we do the interview about. We could just ask you, do you play well with others? And the answer is?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so it's a lousy question. So instead, what we're going to do is pair you with another job candidate, make you do a task for 30 minutes. And the job candidate's job is to make the other candidate look as good as possible, and vice versa. The observer, the facilitator, is a member of our team. They answer questions for the interviewees. They don't ask them questions. Then you get to do a second exercise with a second person and a third exercise with a third person. And at the end of the night, we're simply going to ask all of our observers who showed the best teamwork. First, number one criteria for getting into Menlo. We don't look at your resume. We don't ask you a technical question. How many times have you interviewed somebody and said, they're brilliant, maybe they have some fuzzy team skills, but we can work with them on that? Does that ever work out? We figure if we get people with really good team skills who seem technically competent, we can raise their ability up with our organization. So we interview first and foremost, can you play as a team member? Now, if you take pair programming, collective ownership, open collaborative space, and the things I've talked about, you get effective mentoring. You get strong skills development, right? We create job sharing, part-time resources, leaves of absence. This is all an outcome of being agile, not because we thought this would be a cool jobs program to build, right? It's a side effect. We also recognize after we hire people, they'd like to know how they're doing. We were lousy at this. Then we suddenly realized, rather than have managers review people, why don't we have other people who you actually work with on the team give you feedback? By the way, that's trademark, feedback, right? All capital. Because we provide lunch. So we buy the food, we assemble a team of your peers, you get to decide half of the people who show up, the factory floor manager talks with some of the other folks in the factory, and we decide the other half of the people who show up, and we talk about your performance. There may or may not be a manager. The team of your peers is going to make a recommendation as to whether you should move up in the pay scale. There are 15 pay scales. Everybody knows what the 15 pay scales are. They all get paid the same at each level. So if Rob recommends that Amber be promoted, he knows what's going on. And so everybody hopefully is making a decision. is this a person who's helping make our team stronger so that I can continue to be employed here because we do good work for our clients? Right?
How often do you do this?
This is at the election of the individual. They schedule their own ones. You could have it as often as you like or as seldom as you want.
So if you wanted feedback once a month, you could
Yes.
get it.
Yes?
Okay.
Now, nobody's pushed us that far because then we might not want to buy lunch and there might be others. But yes,
Right.
what we do encourage is that people get feedback more often from individuals or speak, but this is our formal system.
Oh, okay.
So we expect informal feedback on a more frequent basis. And this is usually the good, healthy reminder because then you tell your partner, who was your partner 4 weeks back, about this bad thing they did. And they're like, I didn't know. Great. Now let's talk about how we should give more immediate feedback in the future. So even the people giving feedback ultimately are typically being reminded of their own bad behaviors that contribute to how do we get team success. So why do we do Agile? We don't do Agile because it's cool. When people come to me and say, hey, how do I adopt Agile? My question is why? What problem are you trying to solve? You should be trying to solve a problem. You should be trying to achieve something. If you're doing Agile just to do Agile, wrong answer. All the things you see here, we do because it provides specific, clear benefits to our clients. They can go faster, they can go slower. Right? They can change scope. They engage with us once every week. That's creating the value that we sell. So we do Agile practices, including pair programming, which seems to be the weirdest thing when we go talk to the majority of Fortune 500s, because it gives us clear strategic advantage in the marketplace. Okay, here's what I want you to think about. Mental exercise, but you could scribble these down. List the top 3 improvements that your CEO would like to see from your IT team. If you don't start here, it doesn't matter. Right? Does anybody in here feel whipsawed about their CEO changing strategy every 2 months? It's because they keep pushing the buttons and nothing happens, so they push some more buttons. If you wonder why they keep pushing buttons, maybe you ought to ask. What is it you're trying to solve? What are the top 3 problems on your list that we should solve in the IT world? Because probably that list isn't changing. They're just changing the response to see if anything happens. Push more buttons. That didn't work. Push some more. Once you actually can identify what the top 3 concerns of your organizational leader, identify potentially 3 Agile practices. I'm assuming you're here because you're interested in Agile. You could find other practices, but identify 3 Agile practices that would most improve the situation on those 3 problems. Right? Then, identify how those 3 Agile practices might actually affect your HR practices, right? The fact that we can grow and shrink baffles most organizations because, oh, when we hire contractors, it's for a 6-month term, even if we don't need them. Great, so your HR just created another strategic advantage for me. Thank you. I love it. Then, if you did those same 3 practices, what are the benefits that the team members would actually get out of it? Because remember, you're going to ask them to give something up if you go to Agile. They're not going to have their big cube. They're not going to have their piece of code. So you have to identify the things that they're going to get. And this is best done on an individual by individual basis. So when Nationwide Insurance came and toured our facility with 7,500 programmers, they didn't bring them all. They just brought some leadership. We told them, if you want to go Agile and you want to actually find out what's going to make things work with the people who you're going to change, you actually have to know what's going to affect all 7,500 because it's different for different individuals. I want to learn new skills. I want a faster computer. Right? You want to lure them into the change? You better know what motivates them. Okay. I'm hoping I inspired some questions.
So you talked a lot about how you move them around before the tower knowledge, but how does that affect depth of knowledge? Do you ever find any issues with, since nobody's spending very long doing one thing, they don't actually get time to become an expert on that one?
So how does it affect if people are moving around the depth of knowledge? It does affect it. We pay a cost. Now, here's the flip side, right? Having been a practice director with 100 so odd people at Commerce One, the biggest messes I had to undo were the programmer who had the expertise to know what to do and ignore the business because they had done it before. And what they knew was no longer true. And it was no longer true actually on the prior system they built, but they'd won that battle through technical veto, right? And so oddly enough, I think organizations often abdicate to very knowledgeable tech workers who are no longer playing in the business. Now, if they were sitting right next to the business team when they're having problems, I might buy in more. But so many of them are disconnected, and often the conversation when you have it up close and personal, the business should be behaving this way, so I'll code it this way to make them do it. So I believe there's some expertise you can get. Our team is not confused about being experts, so they don't make assumptions. Well, I mean, all teams make assumptions. They make fewer assumptions. They always ask somebody else on the team who's supposed to be gathering that knowledge, how's this supposed to work? And we think that that ultimately leads to fewer, less expensive mistakes discovered earlier, rather than an expert working on it for 6 months and it comes out and goes, ooh, that's not what we wanted. And then they fight about it. Yes?
How many hours a day do people typically work?
40.
They work 40 hours a week?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah, not a day.
Give me a break.
So,
40 hours a week. So if we need more done, what do we do?
More people.
Add more people.
right.
Because we've cracked that nut. We've solved that problem. Is it perfectly efficient? No. But here's the problem. Working people at 70 hours a week, that pays off for what? A half week?
Right.
And then they start walking like zombies, they start reading their email, they take more coffee breaks. You don't actually get more done. The construction industry has measured this. It doesn't actually work. It just feels good. You can justify to your boss now that things are going better. I don't get benefit from that. Our organization is kind of weird. We're a services firm, so you'd think, oh, more hours is better. Actually, with 50% of our clients, we defer half of what we would bill in lieu of getting an equity position or a royalty on the product. I want to do the fewest hours on each project and earn a high royalty on everything. Working people 70 hours a week doesn't get me closer to that.